Welcome to the podcast, Entrepreneur Perspectives, building and protecting your business one podcast at a time, a CADSource production. This episode exists because of CADSource. CADSource is your content team. You know how many business leaders need help communicating their story? That's what we do. Content strategy, creation, and distribution for business leaders. This provides opportunities, relationships, and a platform for you and your business. Why do we do this? Because at CADSource, we exist to help you create and share amazing content. And yes, you should have a podcast. We'll help you. Learn more by visiting CADScontent.com. Last night, my son, who it's crazy to me because I don't feel like I'm that old, but my son's learning to drive right now. And he wants to get some night hours in. And so in North Carolina, you got to drive certain hours. So he's like, Dad, can we go driving tonight? And I'm like, sure, I got to go get gas anyway. I'm going to be up early, got to get to my office. Anyway, so we do that. And I said, I'm interviewing this guy and he has a podcast called the Fuck College Podcast. And my son, he's still young, but he starts thinking about these things. And I said, I want you to listen to it. And he's got, I think it was your first podcast and you actually talk about why college isn't always the best option or why it's not the best option. So I hit play and we listen to it and we go get gas and we do our thing. And he's just listening and I'm taking some mental notes in it because I knew I was going to be talking to you today. And I want to talk about that. I want to talk about a lot of different things with you. Cool. But that podcast that you have is to the point. And regardless of what someone thinks of like, well, that's a ridiculous statement versus, oh my God, I'm so on board with that. I think you're taking a stance and you believe in that stance. And it's not just a one-off episode. It's not a one-off thought that you have. This is like, no. This is the name of the podcast, the Fuck College Podcast. And you spell it with the F, the apostrophe, or whatever you have in there. But tell me about your thoughts and when you got to the point of college is not maybe for you and it's not for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, for me, man, it was my intention of going to the US was always to pursue my entrepreneurial dream of building a business, but I did not have a business idea, no network before going to the US, right? So my only way that I could stay in the US long enough to be surrounded by entrepreneurs was going to college so I can get a visa to stay here long term. So I was born and raised in Paris, in France. English not being my first language, so I need to pick that up. And basically, the aha moment was me realizing that my peers, my classmates, were not the type of people that I wanted to be surrounded by to build a business. And also, the teachers teaching me about business or entrepreneurship didn't have any marketing or entrepreneurial background. So why would I learn from someone who hasn't done something that's teaching me? And when I could just escape from just learning directly from someone who is living lifestyle that I want to live, who is teaching or doing something I want to create for myself, and be surrounded by people who also want to learn and become more like the type of people I want to become more like, right? And then I just understood like, cool, what is the degree going to help me with? Pretty much nothing. And I went to school while I was doing my business so that I would have a backup plan. But as soon as my business took off, I took a gap here. I negotiated my way with my parents like, hey, give me a year. I do my own thing. And my business did take off. And I dropped out after that. And I said to them, like, one more year until they realized, yeah, you're not even going to come back, right? It's like, no, I'm not going to go back to school.
Yeah.
So it's like a strategic plan of me building something while I follow the traditional path until it made no sense for me to listen to this path anymore.
Okay. So you have your own path that you followed. And now you're offering advice to other people as well. And you said it, right? If you want to become a doctor, if you want to become a lawyer, by all means, if you want to become a professor, chances are you do need to go to college. You need to get your degree. You need to advance, probably get a master's of some sort. So you also understand that there's different thoughts out there, different theories, and perhaps it would be the best thing for them. But you are giving advice to people, possibly mostly young people, that college might not be the best thing. And you obviously thought through this. When did you feel that it was okay to say, I'm going to offer this advice to whoever wants to listen to it?
So this two funny thing of train of thought is one, there's always this like imposter syndrome of not being good enough or successful enough to be able to offload this advice, right? So which is like one of the main reasons of my first business being not me being the teacher or the coach, because nobody will listen to me, or even if I were to do it and people would listen to me, it won't sit right with me, right? So what I did instead of going to college or listening to my teachers or me teaching things I just heard of when I never implemented them, I actually looked for people who were not only doing things I wanted to do, but also being really successful, seeing the case studies, the success stories, and then have them teach to my audience and me being the host of that conversation. So that I acted as the facilitator. I brought the audience, get the eyeballs, the ears, and then the expert was teaching from a place of integrity. And I did more and more of those kind of things. And eventually, after like a year or two, I built a network of being known as the connector or the millennial voice or whatever people call it to be. But basically, it was me creating my own self-education by asking directly to the source, the people who were maybe doing something that I wanted to do. So about Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, digital marketing, sales, right? Like it's almost like getting a masterclass that you always dreamt of having. But instead of like working full time with someone, you actually ask them advice to see ahead of time if that's something you want to do or not. So it took me a year and a half to actually go around and ask those 100+ people the question that I had. And by the end of it, I just hosted the in-person conference that I felt that I also wanted to have. And that's become my first like 6-figure business at 20 years old.
Okay. If you have the money to go to college, maybe not you, somebody else, let's just want to play out some scenarios. They're not sure exactly what they want to do, or maybe they are sure what they want to do. But you know how it is. Someone's 17, 18, 19 years old. They think they know what they want to do. And if they have that vision and they want to go for it and they want to burn the boats, right? And they just want to take the island, that's awesome. Go for it. Whatever that is, then you can, like you would probably say, if you know what that is and it's you want to be an entrepreneur, you want to get into whatever it is that you want to go get into. You want to build a software for the music industry, let's say. That's one thing. But I'm saying for the person that isn't sort of sure, they are sort of sure, they're not sure, whatever that is, and they have the money to go. Maybe it's their parents' money or it's family money. Does that change your thought process as far as going to college? Because that's just something I want to stick on for a little bit, because that is the name of your podcast. And I want to make sure I understand, because I'll look at it from a standpoint of my family or people that I know in the community of what decisions they're going to have. Because as we know, college has become like, well, that's just the next step. Everybody does it. It wasn't like that before. It was not everyone went to college. Now it's like, well, where does your kid go to college? That's just the obvious question. And then if it's not a certain type of college, well, man, someone might look at you weird as a parent, right? That's what people are thinking about, right? So I want to understand it though, from that standpoint of what your thought process is. If someone does have the money, they're not really sure what they want to do, or maybe they are, but they still want to explore some things. What is your thought process around that?
So in this scenario, right, they have the money or their parents are paying for it. They don't know what they want to do, but they are exploring the option, right? It's not like a definitive yes, but it's a potentially yes, right? So in this scenario, like I will always ask this person, like, what's the intention of getting a college degree? Because there's an end goal, right? From you start going to college, you apply, you spend 4 years minimum or 3 years and a half if you do it fast to get a degree to do what, right? How's that degree going to help you to do what you want to do? And if they don't know, that is okay. But I think that everyone should at least have a pretty strong idea of what they go to college for and how it's going to help them get closer to where they want to be at. And if they don't know, I would tell them like, hey, take a gap year or take half a gap year for 6 months to actually learn and explore and take some time to ask the real question, right? Actually, I took a gap year between high school and college, which gave me the chance to talk to 22, 25, 28 years old who actually went through college, where I was able to ask them questions about, hey, did you go to college for a reason? It's like, no, I did it because everyone else was doing it. Like, hey, did you know that you wanted to build a business? Like, no, I actually learned this along the way when I met this person who was doing a business, right? So the biggest thing for me when I took this gap year is I felt guilt the first month I took it because I felt like I was behind my classmate in the high school. And I was this feeling of, oh, I needed to catch up or I was behind. But then I realized like I was behind compared to what? Compared to who? Right? And me being able to go to Argentina for 6 months, to travel, to learn Spanish, while also being able to be surrounded by more mature people who were potentially also exploring what they wanted to do. And I met so many people at around 24 years old who graduated from college, who had a debt of $100,000 and still did not know what they wanted to do. And this is when I realized that searching for what you want to do is an active decision. Like it can't be passively like, I'm not going to wait until college to find out what I'm going to do. So going back to the questions, like what would I recommend? Well, I recommend you making the active decision of whether or not you're going for college for a reason. If it is just for the sake of exploring and you haven't done that prior to going to college, then college is probably going to be the extension of what you went through in high school. Nobody's going to create this hyper-created and curated curriculum for you. It's you fit in a box or you don't, right? High school, they pick the class for you. College, they kind of pick the class for you too. And you pay for that pre-built environment. But if you want to create your own curriculum for the university, which is like your own curriculum, your own journey, then you need to ask yourself, who do you want to learn from? Who do you want to become more like? What are some passion or interests do you have? And who is doing exactly what you want to do? And how can you ask them questions so you can actually ask them what is the roadmap to get there?
I like that. I like the fact that you're talking about, even if you do go to college, finding and seeking out those people. If you don't go to college, seek out those people. Like use it as that type of network. Find the resources that exist in there. Because I'll say my college experience, I was in the Northeast, in Buffalo, New York, and I went down south. And that's culture shock. It's very culture shock. And it's a different kind of city. I was in Charleston, South Carolina. It's a very historic city. A lot of walking around and exploring. And you really you're finding yourself in different ways. And you said it. People are having an opportunity to do that at all sorts of ages now. I've seen high schoolers that really have a great head on their shoulders and they've already discovered that they want to do. I just came across someone who's built a business of videoing and taking pictures of elite athletes in the area and posting them on Instagram. And they're getting found that way and they're having fun and they're really good at it. And they continue to teach themselves the programming that they need and the software and the design elements that they need in their videos and in their production. And so for someone like that, maybe they go to college to take it to the next level, or maybe they just continue to build their business. And like you're saying, it's that end goal. So it's not necessarily don't go to college. It's go to your next step with some sort of plan in mind. But I also think there is an aspect of being out on your own, of living on your own, of navigating all of these things. And perhaps you haven't had that opportunity yet, or maybe high school didn't provide that for you for whatever reason. Maybe high school is very academic and you needed to get out and go do something else and then kind of take it to that next step. So when I say all that, I mean, are you hearing that, or do you cringe when someone talks about, not necessarily me, but someone who's say, I'm going to go to college? Like, if their goal isn't to become one of the professions that you talked about, doctor, lawyer, or a professor, or some of those other things, do you just think like at the bottom line, no, college is just simply not the answer for you?
I also realized that not everyone wants to become an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. Some people do want to have this corporate life, that do want to have this 9 to 5, that do want to have a job, right? What I want them to realize is, are the assumption about college and what comes after it going to match the reality of what's going to happen if you actually do graduate, right?
Yep.
Because most people like just think, I'm going to go to college, I'm going to get into debt, and then I'm going to get a good salary and a good job. But what we know now is going to harder and harder for students, even if they graduate from top universities, to get a job, to find a work and a job that fulfills them, that makes them happy on top of everything else, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people then, they realize that the degree or the curriculum that they went through is not the one that they needed to follow to get a job they actually wanted, because they didn't do the homework of actually asking someone who is doing what they want to do and how they got there. Because most of the time they're going to say like, actually, my degree maybe helped me, but it was mostly me knowing the right person within this company that actually helped me get the job directly. So it was networking and the capital kind of aspect that a lot of people neglect when they go into school and expecting that just getting a degree is going to get them what they need to get a job they want.
Okay. Community college. It's college, right? You went to a community college, I
Correct.
believe. Yeah. What are your thoughts around community college? Because community college, you can take it slower. You have community college, you can go online college, right? There's different types of ways to not be, I guess, immerse yourself into a college campus as we know here in America. So what is your thought on community college and the opportunities there to continue your education?
I love it so much. And I'm so happy I did that, because I wouldn't have had the time to build my business if I went to actual 4-year university, especially for the first 2 years. From my perspective is everyone needs to take English, math, history, or all the basic classes, right?
Yep.
Those classes are way cheaper in a community college. It's way easier for you to get the A's that you need to transfer to like a 4-year institution. And also you have way more time for you to build your own business if you want to do that. I literally compiled 16 to 18 credits within a semester. I was able to ace those tests, condense all those classes Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So can I have a 4-day weekend going to conferences and networking events and workshops.
Yeah.
And I would not have had this opportunity if I had to pay $40,000 and also taking way harder classes.
Yeah. The appearance that has on kids, and I mentioned before, families. So the kid decides they want to go to a community college. They want to take the path that you took. People are talking about where they go to college. And this goes into things past college, right? This is the mental state of mind. This is being comfortable with yourself, making your own decision, moving forward, not worrying about what the outside forces are saying, right? But at the same time, we all know that those things are happening, right? We live in a world of social media where people are posting their acceptance letters right on Instagram to see the picture. They're showing themselves in front of the college. And it's very difficult, especially for young minds, to go through that process to say, I'm actually going to go to this community college. And people are going to think less of me because I've chosen to go to that college. Now, perhaps you haven't had that because you're just saying, screw it, I'm going to do what I got to do. And I'm not going to worry about what these other people are doing. However, the reality is a lot of people are going to go through that. You go on that. I mean, you've obviously seen that. I'm sure you've talked to people who have dealt with that.
So Asian family, dude, Chinese family. So
yeah,
like it's all about like,
right.
How's your son doing? Like my mom is like, my son's doing good, man. Is she good, right? I think she didn't understand what community college was. I'm going to college. She was like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Right. But they explained to her like 2 years, different from 4 years, but I can transfer. So here's the reality, man. Two things. One, there's a much higher acceptance rate for you to transfer from second to third year than if you were to be accepted to top first for university on your first year, right? Because a lot of people drop out like after a year or two. And when you are like top of your major at a community college, especially if it's ranked well, it has good partnership. And this is going back with the plan, right? What's your plan? If your intention is to have 2 years where you're going to figure out by yourself and you want to transfer to your dream school, maybe figure out which community college has the most partnership with the old dream school so you can get there easily, where you can actually back it up with your high school, GPA, but also your community college GPA, which is going to make you way more attractive. Literally, all my best friend in community college, they either transferred to UC Berkeley, UCLA, or USC from a community college in California, right?
Mm-hmm.
And those were international students. So they were competing with other crazy Chinese 4.0 GPA students, but they still were able to not only transfer successfully, but also get scholarship, right? So it all comes down to the plan. Like, what's your intention? Of course, your goals and plan will change along the way, but what is your North Star at the point of you making the decision today, right? And you being able to follow through. So that's one side, right? The second side is what you said about community college being like, oh, perceived value of how people want to judge me, or the people showing up, the college degree, these kind of things. I did not get experience because I got a taste of it before that when I took my gap year of feeling behind, right? And it sucked for the first 2 weeks. And then I didn't care anymore.
Yeah.
Because then I realized that on my own journey, that if I wanted to make it as an entrepreneur, then there's a kind of judgment I will face on a daily basis by my friends, by my family, by other entrepreneurs. And the sooner I deal with it, that I do it for myself, the better I will be prepared for my entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah. That gap year, something that's going on right now with COVID, right? Students are deciding whether or not they got accepted to college. Do they want to go to college knowing that there's a good chance that they're going to be sent home, that it's going to be virtual, that it won't be the same thing as to what they expected. So let's say they are going to college. So people are choosing. And that gap year then allows them, like you were saying, to explore other things. That gap year might turn into 2 years or 3 years or forever, right? They might go to community college. Who knows what they're going to do? They may say, wait, I like this. I don't need that anymore. Because I'm realizing that might not get me to where I want to go because I've discovered these new things about myself. How are you seeing people handle this now? Because we're going to start getting into like what you're doing today. But that gap year that we're dealing with, and not even the gap year, the pandemic that we're dealing with right now, the uncertainty that surrounds it. And for people that are going to college, like you said before, it used to be said, you go to college, you come out, you get a job, you pay your bills, you pay your student loans back. Maybe there's no jobs to be had for those types of students. What do you think about just the gap year and the pandemic and everything that's going on today as it relates to your thought process? Because I think there's an incredible timing that you have with your podcast and your thought process around, yeah, this is something that I'm actually going to take seriously now because I don't know if college, even if it was the right place for me, I don't know if it is anymore because of all that's going on in the world.
I think it's kind of like the things that happen to you where it forces your hand on making a decision. So maybe treat it as if you just graduated from college. You still have no idea what you want to do. You have 6 months ahead of you. before you have to pay rent or something like really, really like need to be taken care of, what are you going to do every day, right? Who do you want to work for? How are you going to get paid? How are you going to get experience, right? Like just treat it as if you literally had a bachelor degree and it's not opening any doors. What are you going to do? Are you going to work at Subway? Is that the best use of your time? Or are you going to actually explore like your interest and figure out like who is teaching XYZ? I mean, I attend online workshops. Also, I attend, there's so many top 50 classes that are free online. You can get a digital certificate that are actually not worth that much, but it is a certificate if you do actually want to get trainings. I know this girl who actually got like 19 certificates from Ivy League schools or something like that by going to those online courses. And she was able to walk away from her semester with all those degrees from Harvard, Princeton, etc. because that's what she wanted to do, right? Going back to the people is like, if you want to build a business or if you want to learn the ropes of building a business, then learn from someone with the internet, someone's company who's doing that. If you want to half, where you can actually learn online and also work with someone else, do that. At the end of the day, Eric, the biggest thing is where you're going to spend your time and what kind of lifestyle you want to have and who is doing what you want to do and be able to learn from them. You don't need to reinvent the wheel because if someone has figured out for you already or for themselves, you can actually just copy what has worked for them. But I think the first question for a lot of people is they don't know who they want to be more like. They don't know what they want to learn. And not that people are lazy, but there's nobody guiding them to ask them the right question that would force them to ask, hey, what are you going to do now?
Yeah.
Who do you want to become more like? Because then they were never taught at school.
Yeah.
This kind of things.
The last question on this topic, you're talking to, let's say, late middle school, early high school kid. They're early, right? They're not there yet, but they're starting to think about these things. They're starting to think about going forward from there. And not necessarily about college, but you haven't been there not that long ago. What advice would you give to someone in that age group about what they should be working on? Because they get frustrated, not all of them, but it's all over the place, that they get frustrated with what they're learning. They get frustrated that the system's broken. They start listening to what other people are saying and they're not, it's a mixed bag, right? Of course, some people love it. What advice would you give to someone in that age group and grades around all of this and what they should be focusing on?
I think that actually I had this discussion with my friend the other day. I think that for those people who have all those questions, right? I think that every one of those kids should think about having a podcast where they can interview adults or other kids who have figured it out and they're doing their research. They are shaping their social skills. They are shaping their networking skills. And they're able to build a brand and asset and content that can be used in the future. Or even if they're not sharing it aloud or to the whole internet, at least they're able to connect with people that are outside of the circle of school, which is self-imposed network, right? By connecting with people who are across the world, connected with some interests, who maybe be one or two steps ahead of them, and be able to ask them the question of how did you become the person you are today? And that is the art of documenting that so much, Eric, is you don't need to be the content creator. You can just be the person that documents and crowdsource information from someone else who has information that you want to share to the world. And for those kids who have those questions, like it'll be a good productive way for them to be able to record it, to learn from them, and potentially even get paid to learn. Because if they're sponsored by a company that targets kids or something like that, they might get paid or it might build up to something. Or even if they do this at the end of the day, I want to join a school, I want to get into college, them saying that I have a podcast on their resume makes them stand out so much among the other kids. So much. At least you have a story to tell that other kids would almost never have.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, I wasn't thinking that's what you were going to say. You're so right on because I believe that so many businesses, I feel like if you don't have a voice as a company, forget a child or anybody, then what do you have? Because now if you have a podcast, I can listen to how you think. I can get behind the scenes of like what's going on because we all want transparency. We don't want to be lied to. And I can understand how you sound. And it might go one way or the other. I might not like it. Well, that's okay because guess what? I was going to learn one way or the other that I didn't like what you stood for. So we don't have to waste time on that. But you're so right because that podcast becomes your resume, your content online, your social media, all those different things it's just your background check, right? It's just how we get to learn a little bit about you. And the earlier you started off, the better it is. And like you said, it's leverage to have a conversation like we're having right now. If you can use that as leverage in a genuine way, and I've said this before, man, you can create so many things. And then you get the side benefits of that. side benefits of becoming a better communicator, of asking better questions, of becoming a better listener. And then the tech that goes on with perhaps you want to edit your own podcast. Well, guess what? There's a bunch of people out there that are going to be starting podcasts. They're going to need someone perhaps to help edit the podcast. So there's so many things that can come from it. And it's like you said before, explore your interest. What if you just love that? What if you just want to do that? Well, awesome. And then there's things that you still need to learn from school. You need to learn how to read. You need to learn how to write. You need to learn how to do math. You need to like all the science. There's certain things that you get to explore and dive into. So no, I think that's an amazing idea. And I agree with it. I would encourage anyone really to start a podcast, no matter what the age is. And I do strongly believe that if you don't have a voice, that it's going to be a struggle going forward because we all want to hear what you have to say.
Let me piggyback on that train of thought is even if you're like pro college, like crazy, like your dream is to let you get into Harvard, right? How about you create a podcast series where you interview 20 to 30 people who are actually students at Harvard who share the story of how they got into Harvard? You interviewing the recruiters, head of admission, right? To ask about the perfect Harvard resume, and you being able to have a podcast where you actually learn for 2 years to create your perfect resume on Harvard. And when you actually have your resume, you say, I have a podcast that shares to other students the success stories of how people go into school. You being able to show that to the person who's going to give you an interview, like there's no freaking way, unless your GPA is horrible, that they're going to be at least interested to talk with you.
Yep. I love the passion you have around it. I was just take some notes because it's exciting, right? When you have that, when you find what you want to do, it's exciting. And you found that, right? You found like the path that you want to go down. You want to do these things. And what's cool is you're also, from what I can tell, you're willing to pivot. If you would discover something new, you'll lean into that. And it gets me into virtual summits because that was a thing that I'd saw when you had reached out and talked about being on the podcast and virtual. I mean, that's a word right now that's huge, right? I mean, there's people that we've communicated with for years that would never get on a Zoom call. Well, now I'm actually zoomed out in many ways because everyone wants to get on a Zoom meeting or Zoom call or whatever. And I'm like, these are people that wouldn't have done that before. So virtual is changing. I've attended some virtual conferences, live conferences. I've seen taped conferences, virtual summits, right? I've seen all these things. I've seen the content coming at me and coming at other people. And I've heard people talk about it in such a positive way. And I've heard of also lead generation, which gets into if you host something, then it can lead to leads. And I want to touch on that a little bit because I want to get into the negative side of lead generation, as you probably understand and see it. Because just like any business, it doesn't matter if you're an attorney, if you're an insurance person, if you're a car dealer, whatever, there's negative sides to these things. Marketers, right? Virtual summits, though, like your podcast and talking about college and gap years and all that, whatever that might be, or not going to college, the timing probably couldn't be better. Not that you would ever choose to go down this road of a pandemic. The timing to have and be in the world of virtual summits probably couldn't be better for you because now everyone wants to learn about, well, how can I do things virtually no matter what it is? And if that is growing my business, yeah, companies want to learn how to do that. When did you start thinking like, I want to get into virtual summits?
So my first in-person conference was in 2016. My first virtual summit was 2017. So it's been 3 years since I've been doing them. So I was like way ahead in the sense that I didn't do it only because of the pandemic. I actually been doing it for quite a while now, which gave me enough time to refine my craft, to test out the funnel, to create case studies and success stories, to refine my thing. And this led me to writing a book 2 years later, right? Way before the pandemic happened. So at the end of the day, the reason why I created my first in-person conference because once again, I didn't have the business experience to be able to teach, right? And I felt like who better to teach than the people who actually I admire and look up to and have them teach where I'll act as a broker, where I'll be renting the venue, I'll be taking the logistics, I'll be doing the marketing, and I will sell the tickets. And this is how I made my first 6-figure in revenue from doing this kind of things. And one of the things that I hated the most, Eric, was it took me 6 months to create this event, in-person event. And the day this event ended, I didn't own any of the assets. Sure, I had a website. Sure, I had recordings. But if I wanted to replicate that, I would need to spend at least 4 months to do the whole process again. And I was so burned out and the authority was great. The speaking was great. But I was like, damn, like this is not like a way for me to build an email list. This is not a way for me to be engaged in my community. And then I came across this idea of doing a virtual summit. And you know what? I'm going to do the same event, the same theme as my in-person conference, but virtual, and which was a entrepreneur event where the speakers were all under 30, right? And they were making above six figure. That was the theme of my in-person event. I want to do the same thing, virtual. And I literally had 10 times more attendees. I had 15 times more profits, and I did the event in half the time. And I was able to relaunch it 2 weeks later, my virtual event, because everything was online. So I own all the assets, the platform, the email sequences, the content was created already. And I just had to open and close the doors again if I want to relaunch it. And me being able to get a global reach, to get attendees to attend for free and then pay for the recordings later on if you wanted to have, and me being positioned as a leader within this space by just being a host was just tremendous value for me for a fraction of the cost. And I did this more and more over and over again. But the biggest thing for me is walking away with a lead generation platform that distributes quality information, that positions you as a host, as a source of authority, without having you to share, but inviting other speakers to share, and also being able to generate revenue from it. Not lose money on the front end and make money on the back end, right? But make money on the front end and back end, and be able to launch it over and over again every week if you wanted to. That won me over, and I kept doing it over and over again.
Yeah. Talk about owning the asset, which is huge, right? Because you're not renting anymore. You have the asset. And we talk about that all the time when content creation, and you have to own that asset because that asset becomes a part of your business, and your business has more value as a result of that. Not only from a day-to-day standpoint, right? Cash flow and money revenue coming in, but just overall, the business is more valuable when you own the assets, right? It's like no different than if the business owns the real estate. Well, they own the real estate. Now there's upside downside to all that, those types of investments. But if you own the content asset, the virtual summit, however you're doing it, even more the better for your business. As you're starting off and you're young and you're in this virtual summit business, did you find it difficult because of your age, or did you find it actually the opposite because they saw you young and hungry, you're willing to do it, or did it really not matter?
The speakers that were on it and the message behind it.
So it was the leverage of the speakers that came to the table. Okay.
Yeah, they never asked you, hey, Eric, what are your credentials?
Yeah.
I always shine lights on the speakers and the people who are delivering and who the audience was.
Okay.
And me being able to, once again, be a facilitator, it doesn't require me to be famous. It's just like, are you going to get the work done? Cool.
Right. That's what they hear.
And for them, it's just a commitment of a podcast, right? 45 minutes interview, in, out. And I'm taking care of the build of the assets of the platform on the back end.
Got it. You talk about Airbnb. So I saw there's an Airbnb virtual summit that you did. Tell me a little bit. I mean, Airbnb is this enormous company. It's done amazing things, disrupted the travel industry. I was just actually at an Airbnb a couple weeks ago, right? So fascinated by their app, their platform, how they talk, how they tell their story. How did you get involved with the Airbnb virtual summit?
So it all started from my first summit where some people looked and found me on my virtual summit, right? Attendees were interested in the virtual summit business model and hey, Rick, I love what you did. I would like to create one for Airbnb. Long story short, we connected with Airbnb and connected with actually someone who was teaching the business of Airbnb, where we kind of not officially collaborate with Airbnb, but they were involved in legal process. Hey, we love what you're doing. We're not going to promote you, but we're supporting you. So it wasn't directly with the Airbnb.com brand. It was with someone who was doing the business of Airbnb and how to set up the short-term rental spaces. And for this person, he had a course. He knew what he wanted to do, but he was having trouble fitting leads into his course. And whenever he had webinars, he only had 5-10 people showing up every time. And he wanted to do a virtual summit. And that was back in 2018, where Airbnb was really hot and the laws were actually way more flexible than today. And he didn't have any connections. He didn't have any network. He didn't have any email list. So long story short, after we hosted the Airbnb summit, we normally self-funded ourselves entirely through sponsorship, raising $25,000 in sponsorship and spent all of that onto ads. But we were able to generate $86,000 and 8,200 emails that were then used to fill his courses. And which led him to getting reached out by Netflix, which led him to getting on stage next to Tony Robbins, because all of the people found him through the Airbnb summit that he was hosting. Even though he was a nobody prior to that, he invited a lot of somebodies around the Airbnb space, and he became authority because he was the center of all those influencers for 3 days.
Yeah. That's amazing. And a lot of it had the leads that came in, the different opportunities, I should use as the word, that came in as a result of the virtual summit. Lead generation, I mentioned this before. I get hit on a daily basis in one of my emails talking about we want to give you leads and we're going to provide you leads and your business is going to go to the next level. Can we talk? Right. So very spammy tactics, which exist in the marketing industry, no doubt. Obviously, I get the sense that that's not what you're doing here because there's, like you said, we're shining light on the speakers. If you want to learn something, you don't want to do anything with it, but you got to learn and take something from it, by all means, have at it. You've seen this, obviously, with lead generation. When we look at our company as a content company, we're not in it to say we're going to provide you leads. Like we don't guarantee a certain number of leads for it. Where you're creating the content, you're creating the asset, you're creating the story that's going to connect at an emotional level. It's going to hit the feels, right? People are going to like, man, I want to talk to that person. I want to talk to Eric Ziyang. I want to have those types of conversations. But there are companies out there, and that's nothing wrong with it if they're doing it the right way, that they are guaranteeing or they're promising, or this is about generating leads for their business. But there's the spam side of it, and then there's the other side of it. Tell me a little bit about what you've seen from just the lead generation business as a whole.
Right. I mean, at the end of the day is what a lead is just having email, right? But what is the quality of those leads, right? Are they open to learning? Like, where do they come from? Are they coming from you? Or is it someone sending the list to you and spending them on content, right? When someone comes in to trade in their emails for a virtual summit ticket that is free, right? They are committed because they're the one who actually done the work of putting email on exchange of this content. And the way that we create our content, by the way, is there's two types of virtual summit. One is more like the podcast style where there's a theme, there's a podcast theme, right? There's a virtual summit theme. And there are some speakers, there are some recordings, but every session is not linked from one to another, where they're almost independent from one another. Even though there might be the same host, the same theme, different speakers, it doesn't feel like really coherent, more like a mixture of different content. The best virtual summit, which is the type of virtual summit that we help create, is the masterclass type of summit, which means it's almost as if it was a course that is crowdsourced and created by the content created by the speaker or the interviewer, right? And the difference here is, yes, the content can be watched alone, but every single content is interdependent from one to another, where you almost create a journey of cool. You have no idea what you start. All the interviews are created for you to go from A to point Z. And if you're point R at some point, you'll be able to go back to the basics if you miss some couple holes. And we're going to lead you from R to Z, right? So this creates a journey. This creates a transformation, which actually makes people want to buy the recordings because it is, once again, acting more as a course as opposed to a series of interviews that are just standalones. And this is like the value of it. When you create like transformational content that makes sense for someone, as opposed to just being a pitch fest of a series of webinars, which is not the intention that should ever be on a virtual summit. It should be like transformation and practical and actionable. People are going to be more committed to your vision, to your community, because then they realize like, hey, this person is not like a bullshit artist. Hey, this person is not only for my wallet. This person actually cares. He knows what he's talking about because I can see this transformation being different from other kind of platforms. And I think that a question is, there are so many events that you pay for, but in reality, you pay to sit in to Pitch Fest, right? Like, it doesn't feel like an event that actually helps you. It's actually an event that is geared towards the event coordinator to sell you on a mastermind or a course, right? Like, basically, create an event that you wish you had is always the intention for our clients. And if you're able to give that to your younger self through an event that is not pitch free, but where you sell from a place of integrity, but focus on giving value, then the lead gen you're going to have, or the emails you're going to have are going to be highly valuable because they know that finding someone like you is rare, because otherwise you would not have created that summit if you could have found this person yourself.
Right. What happens a lot of times is you get on those things, you talk about webinars, there's like a funnel going down, and I'm just expecting to be sold something on the back end of it. Every single time it ends with the next thing, buy my book, buy this, buy the masterclass. What you're saying is we're going to give this to you and it's actionable. There's things that you can do with it. And then if there's a relationship that's formed as a result of that, and we have your email address and you are interested in learning more, by all means, we can continue this conversation, right?
100%. Because a webinar is most of the time like 1 to 2 hours of content, right? A virtual summit is 15 to 20 hours. So you're bombarding them with content, with insight, with actionable step-by-step process. And the reason why we do it is because we know that people are going to be overwhelmed, but in a good way. So let me pour you a fountain of value so that you need us to help you scoop how to actually help you do it. I have a virtual summit on how to do a virtual summit, which is literally our agency step-by-step process. And the reason why we're giving away for free is because, first of all, we want to act as a masterclass for someone who doesn't know what a virtual summit is. Attend our virtual summit so you can actually go through the experience and then learn from the content. So it's like a two-way street of learning, right? But I also know that the people that I want to work with, they don't have the time to figure out everything by themselves. But if you want to do it yourself, you can, which is almost acting as a do-it-yourself kind of course. But if you need my help to actually create a creative strategy and virtual summit for you, then this is what my agency is for. And this is not for everyone. Not everyone can afford like a 30,000 US dollars starting price. But what I do want is inspire you and empower you to do a virtual summit by yourself if you want to.
You read the book. I saw this on another podcast you were on, The 5 Love Languages, which is interesting. I had just read this book this year and I wish I had read it when I was younger. So that's awesome that you got to read that book. And my take is that from your standpoint is you're seeing how to connect with people. And it's all genuine, right? Because you really want to support them in the things that they want. And it sounds like when you're communicating with someone, you're giving them something that they might want if you can learn what that is. Is that right? Are you using it in that psychology of a way?
Yes, but I don't think about it.
Yeah.
When I create an event, it's always going back to this question I said earlier. Like, what did I wish I had when I was looking for that person, right? Or how can I be the person that guides someone through the process of before going to college or during college? Because I had to find not one, not two, but tens of dozens of people who then I mashed up all the knowledge into what I am today, right? When I create this virtual summit, it's like, I don't want someone to spend 3 days and realize it was a waste of time. Because it might be the last summit or the last info product that they poured their faith in. And I didn't show up and I disappointed them and they just gave up somehow. I know that my life was changed by one event, by one person. And I'm sure this person has helped like tens of hundreds of thousands of people. But if he didn't show up for that one event, I don't know where I'll be today. So again, it's like going back to creating experience that you wish you had early on for your younger self so that the people don't have to go through the same pain that you went through. And obviously, like, you need to make money and place on integrity. But at the end of the day is how much time did you spend figuring everything by yourself? And how much money did you waste doing that? Like, how much would you pay for a shortcut? Like, fuck tons of money, right? And then you being able to convey that emotion and feeling is why people will be buying into you and your vision for them.
Well, all the stuff that you're learning, and I use this word in a recent podcast and I think about it a lot, is intrinsic, right? So you take these books, you take this content, you take your experiences, and it becomes a part of what you do on a daily basis. And like you said, you started this process of virtual summits 2017. Well, now we're 2020 and things have changed and COVID and pandemic. So all these things have happened, but you're not in these industries a lot of times. We see it now. I see people selling masks. They're in a coaching business and now all of a sudden they're selling medical devices. I'm so confused by that because they don't seem to line up. I'm not saying don't take advantage of opportunities, but you had built something and it just evolved and you were able to take advantage of the situation related to your talents, your skill stack that you had built up over the years. And that's amazing, right? And that's fun to see. And that's an incredible conversation for me to have with someone like yourself that's doing this, especially at such a young age, and is just plowing forward, but also has an energy to it because I know it's not always great, right? It's not always this amazing thing that's going on. I'm sure there's struggles. I'm sure there's glitches. I'm sure there's, why am I doing that, right? There's all of this that's going on, but I saw it in the email exchanges that we had before. I saw it in the conversations when we started talking. You have an energy level that allows you to stay focused on what you want to focus on because you have a plan. You're going somewhere, understanding that that plan's going to deviate. That plan's going to change. There's going to be a pandemic. Something's going to happen. And you have this. And that is, I think, at the core of it all, because that allows you then to go do whatever it is that you need to do. Maybe virtual summits don't work for whatever reason in the future. I don't think that's going to throw you off. I think you'll just find the next thing.
I love how you pull that off because I didn't think of it this way, but you're 100% right. And I have confidence in the uncertain because I know that if I can't figure something out, I'll have the resourcefulness to find someone who has figured this out. And I shape the skill through going to events, asking questions to people through my virtual summit. But I think a podcast would be way easier for most people. And if you're not someone who likes to record and talk, there's a lot of people who actually created the book version of it, right? Tim Ferriss, his last 2 books were literally compilation of interviews, and he made it into a book. Going back to this college student or high school students, if you don't want to do a podcast, you can interview people, transcribe it, and put into a book, and you have a potential Amazon bestseller, and you'll be able to actually have the same principles, right? But having and creating this resourcefulness of, hey, when shit hits the fan, but having the skills to be able to overcome them because you know that you will be able to figure out no matter what happens, you're going to eat shit no matter what. Like nobody wakes up and they're going to be happy all the time. And if you're not eating shit often enough, that means you're not doing enough, right? In life is the quality of life is the quality of the shit you're going to eat more and more. And there's a difference between like, hey, I'm getting sued for $10 million as opposed to, hey, I don't know what I'm going to eat tomorrow, right? Those are 2 different types of shit, but there's one I'd rather eat than the other one. And realizing that your skill as a person, right? And I think that the reason why I love entrepreneurship so much, Eric, is because I need to change as a person for my business to change and improve. And I use entrepreneurship as a vehicle for me to improve as a person, because as a person that is the face of a company that is leading, all my insecurities in my business need to be solved with my own personality, with my own individuality to be able to overcome those. And I think that a lot of kids, even though if they don't want to become entrepreneurs, it is really great for them to have entrepreneurial skills and tendencies to be able to shape their salesmanship, to shape their networking skills, to shape their confidence, and be able to speak in about what they believe in. And like you said, be the voice of what they want to talk about, as opposed to just being someone who listens to someone and always afraid of what someone else might think of them.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. Eric, it's amazing to chat with you and to plan the 5 love languages. I would give you the words of affirmation that it's impressive to watch what you're doing and to see the energy that you bring, like I just said, and the ability to just reach out and ask and say, hey, I want to be on this podcast, or I want to talk to you, and that you're doing this, and to ask speakers to appear on your virtual summit. It takes a lot of guts. It takes a lot of nerve to stand up and ask for what you want, and to understand that a lot of people won't respond. They will say, no, what are you talking about? But to just keep going in the face of all that. And like you just said, to continue to eat shit over and over again, you have to do it in order to go through it. So I think it's amazing. How do people learn about Eric Ziyang, you? How do they learn about the virtual summits and connect with you to get more information on that?
First of all, I just want to appreciate you again and say out loud, man, for those kind of words. And in some way that I'm sure it wasn't easy for yourself as well. Like that's something that you pick up along the way. You didn't pick up everything in one day. It's like you face one problem, you solve it. You face a new problem, bigger, and you solve it, right? And you, on a way, you become a bigger person. And I think that's the joy of being able to look back like a couple months and a couple years later and like, oh, wow, like how much did I change, or how much did I needed to change to be able to build that thing? And I think that's the really fun part of the entrepreneur journey, of having a almost like track record of your historical achievements and be able to say like, I made it happen, right?
Yeah. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, dude, it's so much fun. And being surrounded by the right people is also equally important. Wanted to close a gap on the college thing is learning and creating what you want to do is great, but being surrounded by like-minded people who are as driven, who are as inspiring, who are really humble and share the same values, and be able to find those people is incredibly hard, because there are a lot of times where you will feel misunderstood, alone, surrounded by people, but feel lonely, right? And that is the worst feeling for someone who's really young, because they get easily discouraged by the surrounding, because that is what they see being reality. But as soon as you see someone who is a walking definition of what is possible for you, because the age gap is really small and what I've achieved is really doable, and you being able to be with them or learn from them or see them succeed will inspire you to do more of it. And I think the world needs more definition of what is possible, of people who are actually not that big of a gap socially or culturally, these kind of things. And so thinking about your son right now is this will be like the biggest challenge for him. But once he finds what he wants to do, finding the right people who are on the same path of discovering what he wants to do with them will be like equally, if not more important. So where people can find me and learn more about virtual summits, So they can find me on Instagram at Yangery20. If you want to learn about Virtual Summit, I have a free Virtual Summit teaching you how to do Virtual Summit called the Virtual Summit Summit.com. And I have a book that explains our A to Z process on how to do that. It's called the Virtual Summit Launch Formula, which is available on Amazon. And I have a podcast called the Fuck College Podcast, which you talked about as well. So this is where you can find me.
Yeah, that's amazing, man. Just keep creating, keep doing what you're doing. I want to stay in touch. I want to just watch what you create from here because I know it's going to be something special and we'll be paying attention to it. So I appreciate you coming on here. Like I said before, bringing that energy, bringing the wisdom, bringing just your insights and your thoughts that you had. And you created so much around that. It's not just you just saying something. You actually believe it and you say it and you continue to learn more about it and take other feedback and share your stories on this podcast. It's amazing. Mother to say, you know what, Eric, go and get it, man. I love that. That's a great story. So thank you.
Appreciate you for having me, man.
One of my favorite things about CADSource is the opportunity to chat with amazing business leaders and entrepreneurs. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you want to connect, you can find me on LinkedIn or visit us at cadsource.com. Thank you for listening to this CADSource production, Entrepreneur Perspectives, building and protecting your business one podcast at a time. This episode exists because of CADSource. CADSource is your content team. You know how many business leaders need help communicating their story? That's what we do. Content strategy, creation, and distribution for business leaders. This provides opportunities, relationships, and a platform for you and your business. Why do we do this? Because at CADSource, we exist to help you create and share amazing content. And yes, you should have a podcast. We'll help you. Learn more by visiting CADScontent.com.